Titile, the murders in the fields of Manchester City. In the period 1963-1965, the city of Manchester in the land of fog was shocked by extremely horrifying information from a case of two cold-blooded murderers, Ian and Myra. Everything is only brought to light on October 7, 1965, when Hindley's 17-year-old brother-in-law, David Smith, arrived at Hyde Police Station with a horrific tale of violence. He reported the incident to the police that on the evening of October 6, 1965, after work, David Smith drove straight to the house of his wife's sister, Myra, and her lover, Ian, at 16 Wardlebrook Avenue, Manchester, Cheshire County, UK, because they had a drinking date. Upon arriving, David went into the kitchen while waiting for Ian to get the wine. About 2 minutes later, a piercing scream shattered the calm of the evening, followed by frantic calls for help from Myra. Rushing into the living room, David was met with a scene straight from the depths of horror. A young man barely out of his teens lay motionless on the sofa, the air heavy with the stench of impending violence. Before him stood Ian, wielding an axe with malevolent intent, his face contorted with a savage fervor. In a sickening sequence, Ian brought the axe down towards the defenseless victim, his actions fueled by a chilling resolve. With a grim determination, he then proceeded to tighten a phone cord around the young man's neck, the grip of death slowly suffocating the life out of him. Caught in the grip of shock and fear, David found himself paralyzed, his mind racing with disbelief at the unfolding horror. Yet, he became an unwilling accomplice, his silence coerced by the looming threat of violence from the murderous duo. Together, David, Myra, and Ian orchestrated a macabre cover-up, their actions shrouded in darkness as they clandestinely disposed of the lifeless body in a desolate field, a grim testament to the depravity that lurked beneath the facade of ordinary existence. Haunted by the spectre of guilt and the gnawing fear of retribution, David retreated into the suffocating silence of secrecy, confiding only in his wife Maureen, burdened by the weight of a truth too horrifying to confront. Convinced by Smith's account, law enforcement, along with reinforcements, arrived at Brady's residence. Initially, both asserted that they were innocent and that David was the murderer. However, David's testimony was so truthful and detailed that the police still suspected Ian and Myra and decided to search the house. Discovered Evans's body in an upstairs bedroom and promptly apprehended Brady. Brady contended that a heated argument between himself, Evans, and Smith that had got out of hand. Disavowing any involvement from Hindley in the homicide, Hindley remained free until 4 days later when authorities found a document in her vehicle detailing her and Brady's plotted murder. After Ian and Myra were arrested, the police continued to search the house where the two lived. In the garage, police discovered a suitcase containing a variety of costumes, notes, photos, and negatives. In it, they could vaguely recognize pornographic photos of 9 children, a 16-minute audio tape of a little girl identified as Leslie Ann Weston, screaming, crying, and begging to go home with mother. Later, Leslie's mother confirmed that the photo and voice in the recording were her daughter. In addition, the police discovered a notebook with the words John Kilbride, scribbled along with photos of Ian and his wife in the wild fields of Saddleworth Moor, northwest England. Suspicions that the couple are serial killers are even more certain when Smith disclosed Brady's assertion about additional buried bodies on Saddleworth Moor. The police opened a large-scale investigation. With prior knowledge of unresolved disappearances, authorities focused on the area frequented by Brady and Hindley, initiating excavations for the missing children who had vanished in the vicinity over the preceding 2 years. Before delving into the massacres of children, in the past, these two murderers also had a not very good childhood. Born in 1942, Myra Hindley grew up in the slums of a Manchester suburb. She is the eldest daughter whose father is an alcoholic and often beats his wife and children. The family home was in poor condition, and Hindley was forced to sleep in a single bed next to her parents' double bed. Their living situation deteriorated further when Hindley's younger sister, Maureen, was born in August 1946. The following year, 5-year-old Myra was sent to live nearby with her grandmother. From a young age, Myra was encouraged by her father to use violence to resolve conflicts. Malcolm McCulloch, professor of forensic psychiatry at Cardiff University, has written that Hindley's relationship with her father brutalized her. She was not only used to violence in the home but rewarded for it outside. When this happens at a young age, it can distort a person's reaction to such situations for life. At age 18, Myra dropped out of school and worked as a typist for a chemical distribution company. Here, she meets clerical worker Ian Brady and quickly falls in love with Ian despite knowing he has a bad past. Ian Brady is 5 years older than Myra. He was born in 1938 in Glasgow, Scotland, to a single-parent family whose mother was a tea-room waitress and whose father was unknown. Growing up in a family lacking love, Ian neglected his studies and went to juvenile court 3 times for housebreaking and threatening others with a knife. As a teenager, Ian had to go to a re-education camp for 2 years after being caught breaking in and stealing. In 1967, after being released, Ian moved to live and work in Manchester. From December 1961, Ian and Myra started dating. During their first meeting, Ian took his lover to see a movie about the Nuremberg trial, where 24 high-ranking Nazi figures were tried. He frequently shares with Myra his passion for the Nazis. To please her lover, Myra also changed her style to blonde curly hair and dark red lipstick, to resemble the image of a woman during World War II. After a period of research, Myra vaguely noticed Ian's unusual features. At first, she often wrote letters to friends to express her concerns. In the letter, Myra said that Ian drugged her and brainwashed her about religion and politics. But gradually, Myra changed from a reserved, shy girl to a sexy, sharp woman. She rarely goes out with friends, only hangs around Ian. The couple became more and more withdrawn, often going to the library to borrow books about crime and criminal cases. At one point, they bought guns, rented a car, and planned to rob a bank, but failed. Dreams of robberies that would make them rich quickly faded. Both realized that killing people was more suitable for their abilities. In 1963, Ian and Myra attacked their first victim, 16-year-old Pauline Reed, his sister's schoolmate, Myra. On 12th of July, Brady told Hindley that he wanted to commit the perfect murder. After work, he instructed her to drive a borrowed van around while he followed on his motorcycle. When he spotted a likely victim, he would flash his headlight. Driving down Gorton Lane, Brady saw a young girl and signaled Hindley, who did not stop because she recognized the girl as an 8-year-old neighbor of her mother. Sometime after 7:30 p.m. on Froxmore Street, Brady signaled Hindley to stop for 16-year-old Pauline Reed, a schoolmate of Hindley's sister Maureen, on her way to a dance. Hindley offered Reed a lift. Reed agreed to accompany Hindley on a trip to Saddleworth Moor under the guise of searching for a lost glove. Upon arrival, Brady joined them, and Hindley informed Reed that he would assist in the search. Hindley claimed she remained in the van while Brady took Reed onto the moor. When Brady returned alone, he led Hindley to where Reed lay mortally wounded, her throat gruesomely slashed. Brady admitted to raping Reed when questioned by Hindley. Hindley stayed with Reed as Brady buried her. In Brady's account, Hindley was not only present for the attack but participated in the sexual assault. The case was at a standstill because the police could not find Pauline's body or witnesses before the girl disappeared. It was not until 20 years later that Pauline's body was found. The victim was still wearing her dancing dress and a blue shirt. In 1964, Ian and Myra moved to live at 16 Wardlebrook Avenue with Myra's sister and her husband, Maureen and David Smith. Because David had 3 previous convictions for robbery and murder, the couple quickly became close to this brother-in-law. They often told David about their plans to kill people but did not invite him to join them. For his part, David thought his wife and husband were teasing him, so he didn't pay too much attention. That year, the two attacked and murdered 2 other minors, Keith Bennett and John Kilbride. They used the same method of approaching the victim and taking action as what they did with Pauline. In the early evening of 23rd of November 1963, at a market in Ashton-under-Lyne, Brady and Hindley offered 12-year-old John Kilbride a lift home, saying his parents might worry that he was out so late. They also promised him a bottle of sherry. Once Kilbride was inside Hindley's hired Ford Anglia car, Brady said they would have to make a detour to their home for the sherry. Brady then suggested another detour, this time to search for a glove Hindley had lost on the moor. When they reached the moor, Brady took Kilbride with him while Hindley waited in the car. Brady sexually assaulted Kilbride and tried to slit his throat with a 6-inch serrated blade before strangling him with a shoelace or string. He then buried his body in a shallow grave and at some point afterwards photographed Hindley and her pet dog standing on the grave, with the photograph showing that the ground had recently been disturbed. On the evening of June 16, 1964, Myra asked 12-year-old Keith Bennett, who was on his way to his grandmother's house, to help her put some boxes into a pickup truck and then offered to drive him home. Ian hid behind the car. Once Keith got in the car, she took the boy to Saddleworth Moor to commit the crime with the same way like others' victims. But the couple's most heinous crime took place in December 1964, when their murders became more skilled and daring. Myra and Ian discovered 10-year-old Leslie Anna Downey wandering alone at the Ancoats Fair. They convinced the girl to follow them to the car park to unload the goods. Afterwards, the couple took Leslie to Myra's grandmother's house. Here, the two stripped Leslie of her clothes, gagged her mouth with a rag and tied her hands and feet with rope. They forced her to pose for photos and recorded her begging for help in a 16-minute video. Ian then raped and strangled Leslie until she stopped breathing. The next morning, they took the victim's body to be buried at Saddleworth Moor. She was then taken to Saddleworth Moor to determine where the body was buried based on Myra's memory. However, the search yielded no results. The second time she returned to the scene, Myra was able to point out the location of Pauline's body, 90 meters from where Leslie was found. Keith has not been found yet. On February 10, 1987, Myra confessed to being involved in 5 murders. In addition to Leslie, John and Edward, she admitted to killing Pauline and Keith. After Myra confessed, Ian, in another prison, also agreed to confess to the police. However, because both had already served life sentences, the investigation agency decided not to open a further trial. In the months and days that followed, Myra asked for pardon many times. She claimed that she participated in the murder because Ian drugged her, blackmailed her with pornographic photos, and threatened to kill Maureen. However, the court rejected it. Myra died of pneumonia on November 15, 2002 at the age of 60, and Ian died of pneumonia on May 15, 2017 at the age of 79. To this day, when mentioning this couple, British people still cannot help but feel indignant at their cruel behaviour, mixed with regret.